"We heard you bought a penthouse. We've come to live with you and make peace," said my son, Lawrence, and my daughter-in-law, Charlotte, standing at my door. After 6 months of them casting me out like an animal onto the streets, they now wanted to come back. But what they saw upon entering left them completely frozen. "I am Hazel. I'm years old, and I never thought the people I loved most in this world would betray me in the cruelest way. It all began the day my husband, Howard, passed away. For 45 years, I was the perfect wife, the mother who sacrificed herself for her family, the woman who never said no when she was needed. I cooked, cleaned, took care of everything without asking for anything in return. When Howard died of a heart attack 2 years ago, my world collapsed. The house where we had built our dreams became an empty and silent place. In the first few months, Lawrence and Charlotte visited me. They comforted me, promised me I would never be alone. "We're a family, Mom," Lawrence would say, hugging me. "We'll always be there for you." What liars they turned out to be. Gradually, the visits became less frequent, the calls shorter. When I called them, Charlotte would hang up, saying she was busy. Lawrence stopped responding to my messages. I became a burden, that pesky old woman who disrupted their perfect lives. 6 months ago came the most humiliating moment of my life. Lawrence and Charlotte appeared at my house with a completely different attitude. There were no more hugs, no fake smiles. Charlotte wore an elegant red dress. Her hair was perfect. She looked at me as if I were a cockroach. Lawrence held papers in his hand and wore a cold expression I had never seen before. "Mom, we need to talk," Lawrence said, without even greeting me. "Charlotte is pregnant, and we need more space. This house is too big for one person alone." I felt as if a knife had been plunged into my chest. "What are you saying, son?" "That you have to leave," Charlotte replied with a cruel smile. "We're moving in here. You can find a small apartment. Something more suitable for your needs." "But this is my home," I said, trembling. "This is where I lived with your father. All our memories are here." "Memories don't pay the bills," Lawrence countered. "Besides, legally, this house also belongs to me. Dad put my name on the deeds years ago." It was true. Howard had added Lawrence's name to the deed to avoid future legal complications. But we never imagined our son would kick me out of my own home. "You can't do this to me," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "I'm your mother. I raised you. I sacrificed my whole life for you." Charlotte laughed a heartless laugh. "Oh, Hazel, stop playing the victim. You've always been a burden. Howard knew that too. He just never had the guts to tell you." Those words completely destroyed me. Charlotte had spoken my deceased husband's name with such contempt. She had defiled his memory in the cruelest way. "You have a week to pack your things," Lawrence said, avoiding my gaze. "After that, we'll change the locks." "A week?" I cried desperately. "Wer will I life? I don't have enough money to rent anything decent." "That's not our problem," Charlotte replied, stroking her belly.
"My baby needs a stable home. It can't grow up listening to the wailing of a bitter old woman."
They left that afternoon, leaving me shattered on the floor of my own living room. For years, I had given everything to this family. I had given up my dreams, my ambitions, my own identity to be the perfect mother and wife. I had nursed Lawrence when he was sick. I had worked double shifts to help them when they first got married. I had been their refuge whenever they had problems, and this was how they repaid me, like I was trash. The following days were the darkest of my life. Walking through that house, knowing it was no longer mine, tore at my soul. Every corner screamed memories. There was the table where Howard used to eat breakfast and read the newspaper. There, the armchair where he hugged me while we watched TV. In that corner, the small desk where I paid the bills month after month. I packed my belongings with trembling hands. Years of marriage fit into barely 6 cardboard boxes. Faded photographs, the dishes I inherited from my mother, some clothes I no longer wore, cookbooks full of notes. Everything that had been my identity now seemed so insignificant, so easy to discard. On the day I left, they didn't even come to say goodbye. I left the keys on the kitchen table along with a note that read, "Be happy." I took my boxes, called a taxi, and went to the only place I could afford, a dingy motel in the seediest part of town. The room was tiny, damp, with moldy walls and a window overlooking a filthy alley. The bed creaked every time I moved. I shared the bathroom with 5 other tenants, and at night I heard screams, arguments, and loud music. This was my new home. This was my price after a lifetime of devotion. For the first few days, I couldn't even eat. I lay there staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering where I had failed as a mother. When had Lawrence become so cruel? When had I raised a monster capable of abandoning his own mother? I tried to call them several times. I dialed Lawrence's number and heard it ring once, twice, 5 times before voicemail picked up. "Son, it's Mom. I just wanted to know how you're doing. Please call me if you can." He never called back. I messaged Charlotte, pleading with her to let me know how the pregnancy was progressing. "Charlotte dear, I know we're going through a tough time, but I'm your baby's grandmother.
I'd love to know who you are."
The reply came hours later. "Stop bothering us. We don't want to hear from you anymore." Weeks passed, turning into a routine of survival. Every morning, I walked around the neighborhood looking for cleaning or elder care jobs. At 68, no one wanted to hire me. "You're too old, Mrs. Hazel," they would tell me with a condescending smile.
Are you looking for something quieter?
Quieter. My whole life had been quiet, predictable. And look where that had gotten me. For food, I bought the cheapest items at the supermarket. Hard bread on discount, canned tuna on sale, fruit that was about to spoil. Some days I only ate once to stretch the little money I had. I lost 20 pounds in 2 months. My clothes hung loosely on me. My face looked haggard, but no one cared. The nights were the worst. I lay there listening to the constant city noise, missing the silence of my old house, missing Howard's presence by my side. I cried softly so the other tenants wouldn't hear me. One night, the woman from the next room knocked on the wall and yelled, "Be quiet, you old crybaby. Some of us want to sleep." That was the first time I felt real humiliation since leaving the house. Even there, in that terrible place, I was a nuisance to others. One day, while walking downtown, I saw Charlotte coming out of a baby store. She carried expensive bags. Her belly was already bigger. She seemed to be glowing with happiness. She got into a new car, a silver sedan I had never seen before. Obviously, they were spending the money that was previously meant for the upkeep of our house. I ran toward her, calling her name. "Charlotte. Charlotte, wait." She turned and saw me running, in my old stained dress, with my worn shoes, with my unkempt hair. The look of disgust on her face hurt me more than any physical blow. "What are you doing here?" she asked, looking around to make sure no one saw her with me. "I just wanted to know how you both were," I said, gasping from the run. "How's my grandchild?" "Your grandchild is perfect and will remain perfect as long as he stays away from you," she replied, quickly getting into the car. "Charlotte, please, just let me." She started the engine and drove off, leaving me standing on the roadside like a crazy woman talking to herself. The people passing by looked at me with pity or annoyance. An abandoned woman begging for attention from a family that no longer wanted her. That evening, sitting in my miserable bed, I made a decision. I would no longer beg. I would no longer humiliate myself and ask for crumbs of love from those who had betrayed me. If they wanted to treat me as if I were dead, then I would be dead to them. However, fate, as it often does, had other plans for me. 2 weeks after that humiliating encounter with Charlotte, while tidying my few belongings, I found something that would change everything forever. At the very bottom of one of the boxes, wrapped in old newspaper, were letters I hadn't seen in years. Letters Howard had written but never given me. Letters he kept in his personal desk. With trembling hands, I opened the first one. My husband's handwriting. That script I knew so well greeted me from the yellowed paper. "My dearest Hazel, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. There are things I never told you, secrets I kept to protect you. But now you must know everything." My hands trembled so much I could barely hold the letter. Howard's voice seemed to speak to me from beyond the grave, telling me secrets he had kept for decades. "My dearest Hazel, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. There are things I never told you, secrets I kept to protect you. But now you must know everything. Before I knew you, I worked for years in a real estate company. With my savings and some risky investments, I bought several plots of land on the outskirts of the city. They were cheap then. No one wanted them because they were far from everything. I thought they would be worth something one day, but years passed, and I forgot about them. When we married, I decided not to mention them to you so you wouldn't worry about money that might never materialize. The papers are in a safety deposit box at Liberty Mutual Bank, number 1247. The key is taped behind our wedding photo. My love, if anything happens to me, these properties must be worth a fortune now. The city has grown out there. There are shopping malls, buildings, everything I dreamed would happen one day. My breath hitched. I dropped the letter and ran to our wedding photo, which I had saved among my few belongings. Indeed, taped to the back was a small golden key. I continued reading the other letters with a racing heart. Howard had documented everything. Property numbers, exact locations, old plans, even photos of the empty lots from the 70s. He had bought 12 different properties, all in areas I now knew were the most valuable in the city. I didn't want to tell you because you were happy with our simple life, he continued in another letter. But if I am gone one day, I want you to know that I never left you unprotected. You are the strongest woman I know, Hazel, stronger than you believe yourself to be. If anyone tries to hurt you, remember that you have the power to defend yourself. I love you forever, your admiring husband, Howard. I cried for hours, hugging those letters. My Howard, my sweet Howard, had looked out for me even after his death. He had foreseen that I might need resources. He had planned my future without my knowing it. The next morning, very early, I made my way to Liberty Mutual Bank. My hands were sweating as I handed the key to the clerk. Safety deposit box, 1247, I said, trying to sound confident. Identification documents, the young man requested without looking up. I showed him my ID with trembling hands. He checked a list. Then he looked at me curiously. Mrs. Hazel, this safety deposit box hasn't been opened in over 2 years. Are you sure it belongs to you? It belonged to my husband. He passed away 2 years ago. He led me to a private room and opened the safety deposit box. Inside were stacks of documents, deeds, plans, and something that took my breath away. An envelope with my name written in Howard's handwriting. For my fighter, when she finds out who she truly is. Inside the envelope was a current appraisal of the properties, dated just 6 months before Howard's death. The properties were now worth a total of $2.5 million. I sat on the bank's plastic chair, feeling the world spin around me. I was a millionaire. I had been living in that miserable motel, eating scraps, humiliated by my own family, while a fortune awaited me. But the most important thing wasn't the money, it was what it represented. Freedom, power, the ability to make my own decisions for the first time in decades. That afternoon, I returned to my motel room and sat on the bed to carefully plan my next steps. I couldn't act impulsively. Lawrence and Charlotte had played dirty with me. They had calculated every move to destroy me. Now it was my turn to play, but I would do it better than them. In the following days, I hired a real estate attorney. I asked him for absolute discretion and explained that I wanted to sell some properties without anyone knowing I was the owner. Would you like to use a company name? Mr. Davies, an older, trustworthy man who reminded me of Howard, asked. Yes, something you can't trace back to me. We set up a shell corporation called Future Investments LLC, with Mr. Davies as its legal representative. In 2 weeks, I had sold 4 of the properties for $750,000. I kept the rest as a long-term investment. With that money, my silent transformation began. First, I moved into a discreet but comfortable hotel downtown. Nothing ostentatious, just a clean place where I could think clearly. Then I went to a beauty salon and had a complete makeover. Modern haircut, color to cover the gray, manicure, pedicure, facial. The woman who looked back at me in the mirror was no longer the defeated Hazel who had left the motel. It was someone else, someone with a purpose. I bought new clothes, elegant but not flashy, clothes in neutral colors, comfortable but high-quality shoes, discreet accessories. I wanted to look like a successful woman but not raise suspicion if someone saw me on the street. The next step was the most important: finding Lawrence and Charlotte's weak point. I hired a private investigator recommended by Mr. Davies. I asked him to find out everything about my sons and his wife's financial situation, where they worked, how much they earned if they had debts, how they paid for the house that used to be mine. The results came a week later and didn't surprise me. Lawrence had taken out a mortgage loan, using the house as collateral. He owed the bank $15,000. His salary was barely enough to cover the monthly payments, utilities, and Charlotte's pregnancy expenses. They were living on the edge, pretending to live a life they couldn't afford. Charlotte had quit her job to focus on the pregnancy, leaving them completely dependent on Lawrence's salary. According to the detective, they had had several fierce arguments about money. Neighbors had heard them yelling at night. Greed, I thought. The greed that had made them kick me out of my own home was now becoming their downfall. But I wasn't in a hurry. I had learned that revenge is a dish best served cold. I spent the next few months observing them from afar, studying their routines, their weaknesses, their fears. I discreetly followed them when they went shopping, to the doctor, visited friends. I became an invisible shadow in their lives, learning everything about them while they thought I had disappeared forever. One afternoon, watching them from a coffee shop across from my old house, I saw them arguing fiercely in the yard. Charlotte was screaming and gesticulating. Lawrence held his hands to his head, as if desperate. Although I couldn't hear the exact words, their body language said it all. They were in crisis. That evening, alone in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and started looking for properties for sale. Not just any property, something specific, something that would send a clear message. After hours of searching, I found it, a spectacular penthouse in the city's most exclusive building. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a terrace with panoramic views, luxurious finishes. Located on the 42nd floor, priced at $1 million. It was perfect. It was the exact opposite of the image of a defeated woman they had of me. It was the symbol of power I needed for the next phase of my plan. I called the real estate agent first thing the next morning. "I'm interested in the penthouse at the Sunstone Towers," I said with a firm voice. "Excellent choice. When would you like to schedule a viewing?" "I don't need to view it. I want to buy it today. Cash." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "Excuse me, Mrs. Hazel?" he asked. "Cash, exactly. I have the money available immediately." That afternoon, I signed the papers and became the owner of the city's most coveted penthouse. As I held the keys in my hand, I knew the moment had come to move to the next phase of the plan. It was time for Lawrence and Charlotte to know that the woman they had betrayed had returned, but this time she came not as a victim, but as a predator. The penthouse was even more impressive than I had imagined. 42 stories high, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the entire city. The finishes were Italian marble. The kitchen had state-of-the-art stainless steel appliances, and the private terrace was as large as the entire house I had lived in with Howard. But I wasn't there to admire the decor. I had work to do. I hired the city's best interior designers to furnish the place with discreet but imposing elegance. I wanted every detail to exude quiet power. Cream-colored leather sofas, glass and steel tables, modern artworks, exotic plants. Everything had to look like it belonged to a successful woman, not the humiliated widow they remembered. While the interior designers worked, I continued to develop my strategy. The private investigator kept me updated on Lawrence and Charlotte's every move. The news was not good for them. Lawrence had been laid off from his job at the construction company. According to my sources, he had had a heated argument with his boss because he was constantly late. His supervisor had given him several warnings, but Lawrence had ignored them, thinking he was indispensable. How wrong he was. Without his salary, they couldn't pay the house's mortgage. My house, the house where they planned to raise their child after throwing me out like trash. Charlotte, 7 months pregnant, was desperately looking for work. But who would hire a woman about to give birth? She had tried to return to her old office, but she was told her position had already been filled. I saw her crying as she left the building, carrying her swollen belly and with an expression of utter panic. It was exactly what I needed. One afternoon, as I was drinking tea on my terrace, watching the city I now dominated from above, my phone rang. It was Mr. Davies. Mrs. Hazel, I have interesting news. The bank is initiating foreclosure proceedings against the property where your son lives. Apparently, they've missed 3 consecutive payments. How much time do they have before they lose the house? Legally, about 2 more months. If they don't rectify the situation, would you like me to investigate further details? Yes, but I also want you to find out something else. Would it be possible to purchase that mortgage note, making me their creditor? There was a pause. That's unusual, but technically possible. Are you sure you want to do that? Completely sure. Initiate the necessary steps. In 2 weeks, through my shell corporation, I became the new creditor for the mortgage on my old house. Now, Lawrence and Charlotte technically owed me $15,000. Of course, they didn't know their new creditor was the same woman they had cast out onto the streets. But it wasn't time to reveal my hand yet. I wanted them to suffer a little more, to feel the same genuine despair I had felt when they left me with nothing. I decided to accelerate their agony in subtle but effective ways. I hired a debt collection agency to pressure them about the overdue payments. Daily calls, threatening letters, home visits. Nothing illegal, but aggressive enough to keep them in a state of constant tension. I also made sure the rumor of their financial situation spread throughout the neighborhood. It wasn't hard. In those areas, information spreads quickly. A word here, a comment there, and soon everyone knew that Lawrence and Charlotte's perfect family was bankrupt. The detective informed me that Charlotte had to sell her new car to get quick cash. I saw her one day waiting for the bus, in her wrinkled green maternity dress, carrying shopping bags from the cheapest supermarket in the area. How different she looked from the arrogant woman who had thrown me out of my own house. Lawrence had started working nights as a taxi driver, desperately looking for income. I followed him one night and saw him parked on a dangerous street corner, waiting for passengers, with an expression of utter defeat. The man who had called me a burden now looked like he carried the weight of the whole world. But what pleased me most was knowing they were constantly fighting. Neighbors told me their screams could be heard in the street. Charlotte blamed Lawrence for losing his job. Lawrence yelled back that she should also work instead of complaining all day. Your mother was right, Charlotte had screamed one night, as Isla, my old neighbor, told me. You're a failure who will never get ahead in life. My mother was right. How interesting. Apparently, Charlotte had known my mother-in-law better than I thought. And apparently, my mother-in-law had a pretty clear opinion about her own son. It was time for the next step. I bought the entire building where the construction company that had fired Lawrence worked. It wasn't difficult. The previous owner had financial problems and was eager to sell. I paid cash and became the new owner. Then, through my shell corporation, I offered lucrative construction contracts to several competing companies. Contracts that would normally have gone to the company Lawrence had worked for. Slowly, methodically, I destroyed every possibility for him to find stable employment in his field. I also bought the building where Charlotte had previously worked. When she tried to beg for her old job back, she found that there were new owners and new policies. Policies that, coincidentally, did not favor employees who had resigned abruptly. Everything was going according to plan, but the most important piece was still missing, the moment of revelation. One evening, as I was eating dinner alone in my penthouse, I decided it was time to plant the seed that would lead them directly to me. I needed them to know about the penthouse, but in a way that seemed casual, accidental. I hired an actor to pose as an old friend of Howard's. I gave him specific instructions. He was to meet Lawrence coincidentally in a public place and casually mention that he had heard I was now living in a penthouse. How is it possible that Hazel has money for that? The actor was to ask with feigned surprise. The plan worked perfectly. The actor met Lawrence at a gas station and had the planned conversation. Lawrence returned home that evening with 1,000 questions and a growing suspicion that he had severely underestimated his mother. That's impossible, he said to Charlotte, as my spy network reported. My mother has no money for a penthouse. She must be living off handouts somewhere. But the seed of doubt had been planted. In the following days, I saw them doing something they hadn't done in months, researching me. They asked neighbors, called old acquaintances, even hired someone to find out my whereabouts. When they finally confirmed that I was indeed living in the city's most exclusive penthouse, their shock was palpable, visible for miles. Charlotte spent 3 days without leaving the house, probably processing the information. Lawrence looked lost, confused, as if his whole world had been turned upside down. Because that's exactly what had happened. The woman they had discarded like useless trash was now living better than they could ever dream. The burden they had kicked out of their own home now had more power and resources than they could ever muster in their entire lives. And the best part of all? They had no idea that their financial nightmare had been carefully orchestrated by the very woman they had betrayed. Now all I had to do was wait. I knew they would come. Desperation, curiosity, and greed would bring them straight to my door, and when they came, I would be ready for them. The call came exactly as predicted. It was a Tuesday morning as I was having breakfast on my terrace, watching the city awaken beneath my feet. The phone rang with a number I immediately recognized, Lawrence.
I let it ring 4 times before picking up.
I needed to seem surprised, as if I hadn't been expecting this call for weeks. Hello, Mom, it's Lawrence. His voice sounded different, smaller, more broken. He no longer had that arrogance that characterized him when he kicked me out of the house. Lawrence, how did you get my number? I feigned confusion perfectly. It was hard to find you, Mom. We need to talk. Oh, now you need to talk to me. How interesting. Months ago, you told me I was a burden and that you didn't want to hear from me anymore. There was a long silence. I could hear his nervous breathing on the other end of the line. Mom, things are complicated. Charlotte is 8 months pregnant. I lost my job, and we heard that you have a penthouse. There was the real reason for his call. It wasn't filial love or genuine remorse. It was pure economic necessity, disguised as reconciliation. A penthouse. Who told you that? A friend of Dad's told us he saw you. Mom, we don't understand how this is possible. When you left the house, you didn't even have money for a decent hotel.
Things change, my son.
Sometimes the people you least expect have surprises in store. Could you tell us what happened? Charlotte and I are going through a very difficult time. Maybe we could come visit you and talk. Their sheer audacity left me speechless for a moment. After humiliatingly throwing me out onto the street, ignoring my calls for months, they now wanted to talk because they found out I had money. Visit me? Are you sure you want to do that? Last time we saw each other, you told me I was a bitter old woman who only causes trouble. Mom, we were very stressed then. We didn't mean to say those things. Liars. Of course, they had meant every cruel word that came out of their mouths. Look, Lawrence, I've been living very quietly since I left what used to be my house. I don't know if I want complications in my life again. Please, Mom. Charlotte feels very bad about what happened. She wants to apologize to you in person, and so do I. Charlotte felt bad. How convenient. Surely she felt terrible now, knowing that the woman she had treated like trash was living in a place they could never afford. All right, I finally said. You can come tomorrow afternoon, but on one condition. No lies between us. If you come here, it's to talk with complete honesty about what happened. Yes, Mom, complete honesty. I promise you. Another lie, but this time, I held all the cards. I gave them the building's address and told them to go up to my floor. I could imagine their faces when they saw the address of one of the city's most exclusive buildings. After hanging up, I sat on my terrace and planned every detail of their visit. It had to be perfect. It had to send the right message, that the woman they had underestimated now held all the power. I hired a catering company to prepare an elegant lunch. Nothing ostentatious, but refined enough to make it clear that my standard of living had changed dramatically. Salmon, gourmet salads, imported wines, delicate desserts. The kind of food Charlotte had dreamed of serving at her social dinners but could never afford. I also made sure the decor was flawless. Fresh flowers in every room, perfectly arranged cushions, well-lit artworks. I wanted every detail to scream in their faces that I had triumphed while they floundered. But the most important thing was my appearance. I went to the city's most exclusive beauty salon and had a complete treatment. Pedicure, manicure, facial, elegant hairstyle. I bought a new beige dress, elegant but not overdone, designer shoes, discreet but obviously expensive jewelry. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman completely different from the one who had walked out of that house crying months ago. This woman had power, had control, had the ability to decide the fate of those who had betrayed her. The night before their visit, I called Mr. Davies to inform him of the situation. Tomorrow they are coming to visit me. I want you to have all the documents regarding the house's mortgage and the properties I bought in their area ready. Do you plan to reveal to them that you are their creditor?
Not yet.
First, I want to assess how desperate they truly are, but I want all the information ready in case I need to play that card.
Understood.
The documents will be on your desk first thing tomorrow morning. That night, I could barely sleep, not from nervousness, but from anticipation. For months, I had fantasized about this moment, the moment they would fully understand what they had lost when they decided to betray me. The next morning, I got up early and checked every detail of the penthouse. Everything had to be perfect. I put on soft classical music in the background. I strategically arranged some books on the coffee table. I left a laptop open, displaying financial investment charts. At 2 p.m., the doorman called me. Mrs. Hazel, a couple is asking for you. They say it's your son and daughter-in-law. Please send them up. I stood before the living room window, with my back to the door, looking out at the city that stretched endlessly beneath my feet. I wanted the first thing they saw to be that panoramic view, that visual demonstration of how far I had come. I heard the elevator open on my private floor, then slow, uncertain footsteps on the marble hallway. Finally, a timid knock. Come in, it's open, I said, without turning around. The footsteps entered my living room and stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel their shock, their disbelief, their utter confusion. Slowly, I turned to face them. Lawrence stood at the entrance with his mouth open, looking around as if he had landed on another planet. He wore old jeans and a wrinkled shirt. He looked haggard, with deep circles under his eyes and a few days' growth of beard. This was not the arrogant man who had thrown me out of the house. He was a broken shadow of his former self. Charlotte stood next to him, with her huge belly and an expression of complete shock on her face. Her yellow maternity dress looked cheap, faded, nothing compared to the elegant woman I had known. Her shoes were worn, her hair lackluster, and she had that grayish pallor that comes from a lot of stress.
Hello, Lawrence.
Hello, Charlotte, I said with a calm voice.
Welcome to my home.
Mom, how is this possible? Lawrence mumbled, still gazing at the artworks, the designer furniture, the luxurious finishes. How is this possible, my son? All this place, this wealth. Charlotte remained silent, but I could see tears forming in her eyes. They weren't tears of joy at seeing me again. They were tears of understanding, of realizing the magnitude of what they had lost when they decided to treat me like trash. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the Italian leather sofa. We have a lot to discuss. They sat down like robots, still processing what they saw. The contrast was perfect. They, broken and desperate, sitting in my palace, surrounded by everything they could never have. We heard you bought a penthouse, Charlotte had said when they arrived. We've come to live with you and make peace. But now that they were here, they were completely paralyzed by what they saw, and that was just the beginning. The silence lasted several minutes. Lawrence and Charlotte were still looking around the penthouse as if they were in a museum, trying to process that this wealth belonged to the woman they had thrown out like a homeless person. Would you like something to drink? I asked with the cool politeness of a perfect hostess. French mineral water, wine from an Argentinian winery I just discovered, or do you prefer Colombian specialty coffee? The specific mention of expensive brands was not accidental. I wanted them to understand that every detail of my new life was a level of luxury they had never experienced. Water is fine, Charlotte murmured, wiping away the tears that were still silently flowing. Lawrence couldn't speak. He still had that look of absolute shock, as if he had seen a ghost. I went to the stainless steel kitchen and poured water into Austrian crystal glasses. As I did so, I heard them whispering to each other. How can she have all this? I don't know, Charlotte. When she left the house, she didn't even have enough money for a decent hotel. Lawrence, did you know your father had saved money? No, Dad never mentioned anything. We lived off his salary as a city employee, nothing more. I returned with the drinks and sat in the single armchair opposite them, my legs elegantly crossed. The power of position was important. I in the single armchair, dominating the conversation, they together on the sofa, feeling small and intimidated. Well, I finally said, you said you wanted to talk, I'm listening. Lawrence cleared his throat, trying to regain some composure. Mom, first, we want to apologize for how we treated you. We were very stressed because of the pregnancy and the expenses. And stressed. I interrupted him with a soft but cutting voice. Is that your explanation for kicking your mother out of her own home after 45 years of marriage? It's not an explanation, it's the truth. Charlotte had hormonal changes because of the pregnancy. I had a lot of pressure at work. Lawrence, I said with the same calm voice I had used to discipline a 5-year-old child. Stop lying. You didn't kick me out because you were stressed. You kicked me out because you thought I was a useless old woman who had nothing to offer you. Charlotte finally found her voice, though it sounded broken. Hazel, I didn't mean to say those terrible things I said to you. I was very scared about the baby, about the costs, about everything. What terrible things, Charlotte? Be specific, because I remember every single word that came out of your mouth. She became even paler. I told her that she was a burden, that Howard knew it too but never had the courage to tell her, and that my baby needed a stable home, not the wailing of a bitter old woman. Very good, at least you're honest now about what you said. I stood up and went to the window, turning my back to them. I could see their reflection in the glass. Two completely defeated people, sitting on the edge of the sofa as if they were in a courtroom waiting room. You know what's most interesting about all this? I said, without turning around. You miscalculated. You thought you knew my whole story, that you knew exactly what Hazel the widow was worth, but it turns out you never really knew me. Mom, can you explain what happened? Where did the money for all this come from? I slowly turned around. Do you really want to know, Lawrence? Or do you just want to know to calculate how much you can take from me now that you've discovered I'm rich? That's not it. No? Then tell me, my son, why did you wait 6 months to contact me? Why didn't you look for me when I was living in that terrible motel, eating once a day, sleeping in a bed full of bedbugs? Lawrence lowered his gaze. He had no answer for that. I'm going to tell you a story, I continued, slowly walking around the sofa where they sat. 2 years ago, when your father died, I was exactly the woman you thought I was. A penniless widow, dependent on her family, with no options of her own. I was vulnerable, I was alone, and I needed love and support. I stopped in front of Charlotte. But when you betrayed me, when you threw me out like trash, something inside me changed. I had to learn to be a different woman. I had to find out who I was without Howard, without you, without anyone else. I continued walking. And you know what I discovered? That your father, my dear Howard, had been protecting me my whole life in ways I never knew. He had made investments, he had bought properties, he had planned my future without my realizing it. Lawrence abruptly lifted his head. Dad had saved money? Your father had saved a fortune, Lawrence. A fortune that now belongs to me, and that you would have inherited if you had been the kind of people who deserve an inheritance. Charlotte began to openly weep. Hazel, we didn't know. Had we known that Howard had left money, you would have acted differently? I finished her sentence. You would have treated me with respect, just because I had money. Is that what you're telling me, Charlotte? I mean, I don't know. I'm very confused. Let me help you clarify your confusion. You treated me badly because you thought you could do so without consequences. You kicked me out of my house because you assumed I had no power to defend myself. You humiliated me because you believed I was weak. I sat down again, this time closer to them. But it turns out you were wrong about everything. Lawrence finally mustered the courage to ask the question that was killing him inside. Mom, how much money do you have exactly? I smiled for the first time since they arrived. It was a smile without warmth, without maternal love. It was the smile of someone in complete control of the situation. Do you really want to know? Yes, I have enough to buy the building you live in. In fact, I have enough to buy the entire block if I feel like it. They fell completely silent. I have enough to ensure that Charlotte's child studies at the best universities in the world, or to ensure that he never gets a dime from me. I have the power to completely change your lives for the better, or to completely ruin them. Charlotte held her belly, as if the baby could hear what was happening. And you know what else I have, Lawrence? I have all the connections I've built in these months. I know the directors of the city's most important construction companies. I know the HR managers who decide who gets a job and who doesn't. Lawrence went completely pale. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying that the power you thought you had over me, I now have over you, and I'm still deciding what to do with it. I stood up and went into the kitchen. While I think about it, why don't you tell me what your finances are currently like? I've heard rumors that you're not doing very well. Rumors? Who told you that? In this city, Lawrence, if you have money and connections, information comes to you on its own. I know you lost your job. I know Charlotte had to sell her car. I know you're behind on your mortgage payments. Charlotte broke down completely. We don't know what to do. The baby will be born in a month, and we have no money for anything. They're going to take our house, and we have nowhere to go. What a terrible situation, I said in a completely neutral voice. You must feel very vulnerable, very desperate, very alone. I let them process my words for a moment, just as I had felt when they cast me out onto the street. The message had been received loud and clear. Now they understood that their visit was not a simple family reconciliation. It was the moment when the woman they had betrayed would decide their fate, and I savored every second of their terror. The silence that followed my words was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Charlotte was openly sobbing, desperately holding her belly. Lawrence held his head in his hands, finally understanding the magnitude of what they had done and the consequences they now faced. I stood by the window, watching them slowly fall apart. It was exactly what I had planned, but a small part of me was surprised at how much I enjoyed their suffering. Please, Charlotte murmured through tears. Hazel, please. I know we hurt you. I know we were terrible to you. But the baby, your grandson, isn't to blame for our mistakes. There it was, the last resort, using the baby as an emotional shield. It was predictable, but effective. For a moment, I felt my heart soften slightly. My grandson? I asked softly. How do you know I want anything to do with him? After all, his mother told me he needed a stable home, without the wailing of a bitter old woman. I was wrong, I was scared, and I said terrible things. But now I understand that the baby needs his grandmother. He needs to get to know the extraordinary woman you are. Extraordinary. What an interesting change of opinion. 6 months ago, I was a useless burden. Lawrence finally lifted his head. Mom, we know we don't deserve your forgiveness. We know we were cruel and unfair to you, but we're desperate. Go on, I said, curious to see how far he was willing to humble himself. I lost my job 2 months ago. I've looked everywhere for work, but no one will hire me. It's as if there's a blacklist with my name on it. I couldn't suppress an inward smile. My network had worked perfectly. Charlotte has tried to work, but no one wants to hire a woman who's 8 months pregnant. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank has sent us eviction notices. In 2 weeks, they'll foreclose and kick us out of the house. The house that used to be mine, I added softly. Yes, the house that used to be yours. The house where we were so happy when we were a family. When we were a family. Are you suggesting we're not a family anymore? No, I don't know what we are now, Mom. I walked closer and sat at the coffee table opposite them, close enough to see every detail of their despair. I'll tell you exactly what we are now, Lawrence. We are strangers. You made sure of that when you decided I was worthless to you. Charlotte tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand to silence her. But we're also something more interesting. You are people who need something from me, and I am someone who has the power to give it to you or deny it. That is our new family dynamic. What do you want from us? Lawrence asked, his voice broken. That's the wrong question, my son. The right question is, what are you willing to give to get my help? They looked at each other, obviously confused. No, we don't understand. It's simple. You treated me as if I were dispensable when you thought I had nothing to offer you. Now you want my help because you've discovered I have something valuable. But what are you offering me in return? In return? Charlotte asked. We're your family, your son and daughter-in-law.
No. Ian swore it firmly.
You lost the right to play that card when you threw me out like trash. If you want my help now, you have to earn it. How? Lawrence asked. I stood up and went to my desk, where I had prepared several documents. It was time to show my hand. First, I want you to fully understand the situation you're in. I picked up the first document. This is the foreclosure notice for your house. You have exactly X days before you're evicted. Both went completely pale. This, I continued, picking up another sheet of paper, is a credit report showing all your debts. Besides the mortgage, you owe $25,000 on credit cards, $6,000 in student loans, and $4,500 in medical expenses for the pregnancy. How did you get this information? Lawrence mumbled. When you have money and connections, it's surprisingly easy to get information. I picked up the third document. And this is a report on Lawrence's job prospects in the construction sector of this city. Spoiler alert, they're not good. What does that mean? It means he's effectively been blacklisted. The major companies have received information about your lack of professional reliability. That's not true. I was a good employee. Perhaps, but now you have a different reputation, and changing a reputation is very difficult, unless you have help. Charlotte was crying so hard her whole body was shaking. Why are you doing this to us? Why are you so cruel? Cruel, Charlotte? I haven't done anything cruel. I'm just showing you the reality of your situation. The same reality I had to face when you destroyed my life. I sat down opposite them again. But here's the difference between you and me. I have the power to change your situation. I can make all your problems disappear with one phone call. Would you do that? Lawrence asked, a faint glimmer of hope in his voice. Perhaps, but first, you must understand something fundamental. I looked them directly in the eyes. I owe you nothing, absolutely nothing. For 45 years, I devoted myself to my family. I sacrificed my dreams, my ambitions, my own identity to be the perfect mother and wife. And you repaid me by throwing me out like trash. Mom, I said, I'm not finished yet. Now, by a miracle of fate, I have the power to help you. But if I choose to do so, it will be on my terms, by my rules. What terms? Charlotte asked. First condition, public acknowledgement of what you did to me. I want you to go to every person who was present on the day you kicked me out of the house and tell them exactly what happened. I want you to admit that you were cruel and unfair and that I did not deserve that treatment. They looked at each other uneasily. Second condition, Charlotte will no longer use my last name. If you want to be in my life, it's because I choose to forgive you, not because you have some familial right to me. As for the baby will bear the surname I decide, when he is born, if I even want to have a relationship with him. Third condition, you will move out of the house. That house holds too many painful memories for me. If I help you financially, it's so you can find a new place to start fresh, without polluting my happy memories with Howard. But where will we live? That depends on whether you fulfill my other conditions. How many more conditions are there? Lawrence asked. As many as I deem necessary, because this time, I'm in control. I stood up and went back to the window. You have 24 hours to decide whether to accept my conditions or to deal with your situation alone. If you decide to accept them, come back here tomorrow evening with a clear answer and a plan for how you will meet each of my conditions. And if we don't accept? Then you leave here right now and never come back, and you'll have to solve your financial crisis without my help. The weight of the decision visibly crushed them. They knew they had no real options. They were completely at my mercy. Before you go, I added, I want you to know one more thing. Both looked at me expectantly. I am the new owner of your mortgage debt. The bank sold me your loan 2 weeks ago, so technically, you no longer owe money to the bank but to me. The revelation left them completely speechless. That means your fate literally lies in my hands. I can foreclose on the mortgage tomorrow, or forgive the entire debt. It all depends on how convincing your apologies are. They had come seeking reconciliation, but they found justice. Coldly calculated, but ultimately justice. The revelation that I was now their creditor plunged them into a state of total shock. Lawrence stood with his mouth agape, slowly processing that the woman he had thrown out of the house now had the legal power to evict him. Charlotte began to hyperventilate, clutching her chest and trying to breathe. You're saying you bought our debt? Lawrence mumbled, his voice broken. Precisely. Through my investment company, I acquired your mortgage loan from the bank. Technically, you now owe me $15,000. But what that means is I can evict you at any time. I can foreclose on the mortgage tomorrow if I wish. Your home, your security, the future of your child, all of it is in my hands. Charlotte leaned forward, sobbing uncontrollably. That can't be true. This can't be happening. Oh, it's very real, Charlotte. As real as when you told me my grandson needed a stable home, without the wailing of a bitter old woman. I walked to my desk and pulled out another document. This is the purchase agreement for the debt. As you can see, it's dated 3 weeks ago. I've been your creditor ever since, silently watching you despair. Lawrence took the paper with trembling hands and read it. His eyes filled with tears as he confirmed it was real. Mom, this is pure revenge. No, my son, this is justice. Revenge would have been foreclosing on the mortgage the same day I bought the debt. Justice is giving you the opportunity to earn my forgiveness. How could you plan all this? How could you be so calculating? I sat down opposite them again, this time with a serious expression. Do you want to know how I learned to be calculating? I'll tell you. I leaned back in my chair, looking them directly in the eye. After you threw me out, I spent 3 months in a terrible motel. 3 months where I ate once a day. 3 months where I was humiliated by strangers. 3 months where I wondered where I had failed as a mother. Mom, don't interrupt me. During those 3 months, I cried every night. I blamed myself. I thought perhaps you were right, that maybe I was a useless burden. Charlotte lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen. But one night, after a woman in the motel yelled at me for crying too loudly, I had an epiphany. It wasn't me who had failed, it was you. You had failed as human beings. You had every right to be angry, Lawrence admitted. It wasn't just anger, it was clarity. For the first time in my life, I saw the situation without the filter of blind maternal love. I saw a son who had been raised with all the love in the world turn into a man capable of betraying his own mother. I saw a daughter-in-law who had been welcomed into my family like a daughter turn into a cruel woman who used words as weapons. I walked to the window. I became the predator you never saw coming. And now you're going to completely destroy us. That decision hasn't been made yet. It depends on you. I picked up another document from the desk. This is a payment plan my lawyer has prepared. If you decide to meet my conditions, you can pay off your debt to me in 5 years. Interest-free. 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 I will also get Lawrence a job at a reputable construction company, Meridian Construction Group, with a salary of $6,500 a month, which will allow you to live a decent life. Why would you do that after everything you've said? Because despite everything, I am still your mother. And mothers, real mothers, don't abandon their children, no matter how much they love them. Charlotte began to cry again, but this time they weren't tears of despair, but of relief. But, I continued with a firm voice, if you reject my conditions, if you try to negotiate or manipulate the situation, I will foreclose on the mortgage immediately. I will have you evicted without a dime and ensure that Lawrence never gets a job in this city.
We understand.
Lawrence mumbled.
Truly?
Because I need to be absolutely certain you understand the situation. I stood up and slowly walked around them, like a lawyer cross-examining a witness. You are no longer my loved ones who made a mistake. You are debtors who betrayed their creditor. The difference is crucial. What do we have to do to show that we understand? Tomorrow, before you come here, you will visit every person who was present on the day you threw me out of the house. You will tell them exactly what happened and apologize on my behalf.
On your behalf?
You will say, we have come to beg Hazel's forgiveness on her behalf, because we treated her unfairly, and we want her to know that we recognize our mistake.
Lawrence swallowed. Everyone?
Even the neighbors. Especially the neighbors. I want the entire block to know that their new owners have admitted to making a grave mistake.
New owners.
I smiled for the first time in the entire conversation.
I didn't mention it, did I?
I also bought the entire block where you used to live. Now I own all the houses in that neighborhood. The shock on their faces was absolute. All the houses. All of them. It was a smart investment. The area is rapidly increasing in value. But what that means is that all your neighbors are now my tenants, and they will all know exactly why you lost your house. Charlotte clutched her belly as she felt a contraction.
Are you all right?
I asked. My maternal instinct automatically kicked in. It's just the stress. The baby moves a lot when I'm nervous. For the first time in the entire conversation, my expression softened slightly. Charlotte, regardless of what you do with my conditions, when it's time for the birth, I will be there if you need me.
Seriously.
This baby is my grandson. No matter what has happened between us, I will not punish an innocent for his parents' mistakes. Lawrence buried his face in his hands. Mom, how did we get to this point? How did our family become so destroyed? It was destroyed because you decided that money was more important than love. It was destroyed because you believed you could treat someone badly without consequences. Is there a way to repair the damage? Perhaps. But repair takes time, genuine effort, and real changes in who you are as people. I sat down opposite them one last time. You have until 8 p.m. tomorrow evening to decide. Either you fully accept my conditions, or you face the consequences of your decisions alone. And if we accept, can things go back to how they were? No, Lawrence, things will never be as they were. But perhaps we can build something new, something based on mutual respect, instead of assumptions about who has power or not. They slowly stood up from the sofa. Charlotte needed Lawrence's help to get up. Thank you for giving us a chance, she murmured. Don't thank me yet. First, show me you deserve it. I escorted them to the penthouse door. One more thing, I said before they left. When you come back tomorrow, I want you to bring a handwritten letter explaining exactly what you've learned from this experience and how you intend to be different in the future.
A letter.
A letter, because written words carry weight, and I need to see that you truly understand the gravity of what you've done. They left in silence, burdened by the weight of everything they had discovered. As I closed the door, I stood in my living room, surrounded by luxury, but with a strange hollowness in my chest. I had won. I had the power, I had the control, I had the justice I had sought. But for the first time in months, I wondered if the victory would be as sweet as I had imagined. The night after their visit was the longest I had experienced in months. I stayed awake on my terrace, watching the city lights twinkle like terrestrial stars, thinking about everything I had said and done. For the first time since I had started my revenge plan, I felt something akin to doubt. Had I gone too far? Was it justice or just cruelty in disguise? But every time I started to waver, I remembered Charlotte's exact words, "My baby needs a stable home. It can't grow up listening to the wailing of a bitter old woman." I remembered the cruel smile on her face when she kicked me out of my own house. I remembered the months of humiliation, hunger, and despair. No, I hadn't gone too far. I had gone exactly where I needed to go. The next day, early in the morning, reports from my neighborhood spies began to come in. Lawrence and Charlotte had started their apology rounds at 7 a.m. house by house, neighbor by neighbor, publicly humbling themselves as I had demanded. Isla, my old neighbor, called me to tell me all the details. Hazel, you can't imagine what I just witnessed. Your son and his wife came to my house in tears, begging for forgiveness on your behalf. They said they had made a terrible mistake with you and wanted the whole block to know. What else? I asked. Charlotte was crying so much she could barely speak. Lawrence told me the whole story, how they kicked you out of your house, how they treated you badly, how they realized they had lost the best mother in the world out of greed. And what did you tell them? I told them I always knew they were ungrateful, that a woman like you, who sacrificed her whole life for her family, deserved respect, not betrayal. I also told them I hoped they would learn their lesson. Throughout the day, similar reports poured in. In every house, Lawrence and Charlotte repeated the same story, publicly begging forgiveness for treating me unfairly. By noon, the entire block knew exactly what had happened and who was right in this story. At 6 p.m., 2 hours before the appointed time, I carefully prepared for our final meeting. I put on a gray pantsuit, elegant but authoritative. I wanted them to understand that this was not a casual family gathering, but a business negotiation where I held all the power. I prepared the living room for the reception of documents. I had the debt forgiveness papers, Lawrence's employment contracts, information about available apartments in the city, and the specific terms of our new family agreement ready. At exactly 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see that they looked different. Smaller, humbler, but also more sincere than I had seen them in years. Good evening, I said with a neutral voice. Did you bring everything I asked for? Yes, Lawrence replied, handing me a handwritten letter. We made all the visits and wrote the letters you requested. Come in and sit down. This time, they sat closer to the edge of the sofa, in the posture of someone awaiting instructions, not someone intending to demand anything. I opened Lawrence's letter first. Dear Mom, these past few days, I have reflected on the man I have become, and I am deeply ashamed of it. I kicked you out of your own home because I thought I had the right to. I treated you as if you were dispensable because I assumed you had no value beyond what you could give me. I behaved like a selfish child, not the man you raised with so much love. I have learned that respect is not based on what someone can offer you, but on acknowledging their human dignity. I promise to be a better father to my child than I was a son to you. With love and sincere remorse, Lawrence. The letter was simple but honest. I could feel that the words came from the heart, not just from desperation. Charlotte's letter was longer. Dear Hazel, I have no excuses for my behavior. I treated you with a cruelty that has no justification. I used words as weapons to intentionally hurt you. And that says everything one needs to know about the person I was then. In these months, as my life fell apart, I understood what it meant to be vulnerable, to be afraid, to be dependent on the kindness of others. And I realized that was exactly how you felt when we threw you out. The difference is that you had done nothing to deserve it. I want my child to know his grandmother, but only if you choose to forgive me. Not because I have a right to your forgiveness, but because I hope to earn that opportunity. With respect and humility, Charlotte. I placed the letters on the table and watched them in silence for long minutes. Very good, I finally said. You have publicly apologized and written letters that show a certain level of understanding of what you've done. That means you are ready to hear my final conditions. I picked up the prepared documents. First point, the $15,000 mortgage debt will be completely forgiven. The house is yours, free of encumbrance. They looked at each other with utter disbelief. Seriously? Seriously. But don't rejoice yet. There are conditions. What? The house is conditional on being held in trust for my grandson. You can live there until he is 18 years old, at which point he will decide what happens to the property. We understand. Second point, Lawrence will start working at Meridian Construction Group, one of the most respected companies in the city, on Monday. Starting salary, $6,500 monthly. $6,500? That's more than double what he earned before. That's what an employee who shows up on time, works hard, and has a strong recommendation is worth, which brings me to the third point. I looked at them sternly. I will be your silent overseer for the first year. If you are late even once, if you treat a colleague poorly, if you show any sign of the arrogant behavior you showed me, you will be immediately dismissed and will have no possibility of finding work in any other construction company in this city. Understood. Fourth point, Charlotte will receive full prenatal care at the city's most exclusive clinic. All costs covered. Charlotte began to cry with relief. Fifth point, when my grandson is born, I will be present if you wish. And I will have regular access to him. Not as a favor you grant me, but as a right I have earned as his grandmother. Of course. Sixth point, you will never again make important family decisions without consulting me first. Moves, jobs, child-rearing, everything must be discussed with me. Is that not a bit controlling, Charlotte? You lost the right to complete family autonomy when you showed you couldn't make decisions that considered the well-being of all. You're right. Seventh and final point, once a month for the next 5 years, you will have dinner with me. Not because we have to pretend to be a normal family, but to maintain open communication and ensure you uphold your part of the agreement. I stood up and walked to the window one last time. These conditions are non-negotiable. You accept them completely, or you reject them completely. There is no middle ground. We accept, they said in unison. Are you sure? Because once you sign these documents, there's no turning back. We're sure, Lawrence confirmed. We spent the next hour signing documents, reviewing details, setting dates. When we finished, for the first time in months, all three of us were in the same room without overt hostility. May I ask you something? Charlotte said, as she put away her copies of the contracts. Go ahead. Will you ever truly forgive us, or will we always just be an obligation to you? The question surprised me. For months I had planned this moment, but I had never really considered what would come next. Honestly, Charlotte, I don't know. Forgiveness is not something you can force or plan. It's something that grows over time, if actions show it's deserved. And if we truly work hard to show you we've changed, then perhaps over time, we can build something new. Not the relationship we had before, because that died the day you threw me out. But perhaps something different, something honest, something better. I smiled for the first time with genuine warmth. Ask me again in 5 years. As they left that evening, I remained alone in my penthouse, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I hadn't gotten my family back. That family had died forever. But I had gained something more valuable, respect, honesty, and the possibility of a future built on solid foundations rather than fragile assumptions. 6 months later, when my grandson was born, I was there to welcome him. And holding him in my arms for the first time, I understood that everything had been worth it, not because of the revenge, but because of the chance to start anew.